Well, Ukraine will, in fact, give up eastern Ukraine. They will never give it back. That they would never win it back. They never could. This is something we've been saying for years now, and it may soon become a reality. The Telegraph is reporting that Ukraine has softened on this idea of taking back that land. I mean, they never could, but okay. Save your pride if you want to. But Zelensky knows for sure that this would spell the end of his presidency and his rising star. He's only still in office because he continues to extend martial law. His approval ratings have plummeted. He will not hold elections. He most likely would not win them if he did. Now, if President Trump and President Putin come to an agreement later this week in Alaska, he's done. Zelensky's done. He'd have to allow elections, and his celebrity and money would be gone. What money, you say? Oh, here on Redacted, we've been reporting for years that his inner circle has been funneling money from our U.S. aid into their own personal coffers. Now, outlet in Turkey is reporting that is to the tune of $50 million per month. That's our money that we send abroad that has crashed the economy in the U.S. and Europe. All right, for some, this was done through a bank in the UAE, but there's a separate report of theft of cryptocurrency through a bank in France. Now, again, this isn't new to us here on Redacted. We've been reporting this aid theft since 2022, but okay, it's still happening. Why has that not been cut off? Now Zelensky's saying, yeah, you might come up with a peace deal, but I, as the president of Ukraine, cannot go along with it because Constitution. All right, this crazy Telegraph headline admitting that this is to save Zelensky himself more than Ukraine. President Trump didn't like that. He said he would try to get back some oceanfront property, but he's annoyed at these excuses that Zelensky is giving preemptively. Watch.
They need, but I want to have a meeting set up between the two leaders. I was a little bothered by the fact that Zelensky was saying, well, I have to get constitutional approval. I mean, he's got approval to go into war and kill everybody, but he needs approval to do a land swap because there'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody for the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both. So there's good and there's bad. But it's very complex because you have lines that are very uneven, and there'll be some swapping, there'll be some changes in land, and the word that they will use is, they make changes. We're going to change the lines, the battle lines.
All right. Well, Colonel Davis joins us today, Daniel Davis, and on his show, he is predicting for months and months and months that Ukraine would never get this territory back, and they continue to lose it. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. What is your sense of this? Deal or no deal? Are we going to get something this Friday, or are we just going to keep dragging this out?
Well, that really depends a lot on President Trump, whether there's going to be a deal, because I think especially because of what's going on the Eastern Front right now, north of Pokrovsk and around that area where the Russians have made a massive breakthrough, the biggest one in 2 years. It's not minor. It's also not something that's just a fluke. It's reasonable and predicted. That's going to put even more power in Putin's hands. Actually, the power was already in Putin's hands in terms of leverage. This just really makes it into stark reality about what Russia can do and what Ukraine can't do. So I think that probably Putin is going to say, hey, we're going to reiterate what we're willing to do back in June of 2024 on the 14th of June, when they said it's all the administrative borders of all 4 of these provinces plus Crimea and demilitarization, denazification. And I think if he doesn't get those, and he's going to say politely, we'll just keep going on. What you saw happen in Pokrovsk is going to continue to happen in other parts of the front, and either you get an ugly deal right now, or we'll just take what we want, and that's probably going to be at least up to the Dnieper River and may well include both Kharkiv and Odessa. So I think that's what is on the table here, and whether Trump agrees to that or not, it seems pretty unlikely that Ukraine and Europe will agree to it, because I think that the sides between Trump and Europe and Ukraine is further away than Trump and Putin, which is kind of embarrassing, but that's kind of where we are.
You know, for a long time, we've been hearing President Putin holds all the cards. You know, I think MAGA individuals think that Trump really is the driver of all of this. But as you just pointed out, they keep making major advances. Ukrainian military has been crumbling, recruiting 60-year-olds and now 14-year-olds to fight. So they can keep pushing. They can keep sort of like this war of attrition, keep pushing and pushing and pushing. I just want to put up the map here on the screen because just so our audience understands this. I mean, that whole area in pinkish, I guess, salmon, appropriate for Alaska, salmon, that's what Russia, that used to be Eastern Ukraine. It is now mostly the Russian Federation. They voted to become overwhelmingly Russian. They voted in elections to become Russian. This idea that the mainstream media keeps referring to it as Eastern Ukraine as if Putin's going to give this land back now that they're officially part of the Russian Federation is kind of preposterous, right?
Well, yeah, and in fact, I've been speaking with some Russian sources that said, hey, if you ever wanted to see a situation where the people of Russia could turn against Putin, it's not because the war goes badly, it's because Putin would surrender territory without need from a position of power and strength. And I don't think that Putin's going to have any interest or any thought of doing that kind of thing because he has got his reputation and his name on the line. He has told all those people that everyone's there, even those on the side of the line that Ukraine still has control over. He said all of that area is incorporated and into the Russian constitution. He would have to go back and change his constitution in order to give that, in order to surrender that to Trump. And I mean, I just can't see how Putin would survive politically if he did that because everyone in Russia understands he doesn't have to, as opposed to this alleged comment you mentioned a second ago from Zelensky, who also cited his constitution as to why he can't give up the territory. But the problem is it always comes down to what you can do and what you can't do. And the reality on the ground and spin will no longer help you out. Russia can commandeer this territory. They can require it, and the Ukraine side doesn't have the power to deny it. So you can either have an ugly deal to where you only surrender the administrative orders of those territories, or like I said, the likelihood is that Russia is going to keep rolling to the west until they get everything that they feel they need, which probably means everything past up to the Dnieper River.
Can we go back to the map for a second? Because this is from Russian state media. And what they're telling us is that the blue dots are where the Ukrainian army is stationed. Why the heck are they not on the battle lines? What are they doing so far from the war? And if you think of this as a U.S. taxpayer, knowing that you're funding this war, why are we funding the army where the war is not?
Yeah, up towards Belgorod. I don't know, Colonel, if you can see this map on your screen, but
they are far north of where the contested region is, clustered in those regions. Something that a former Azov lieutenant colonel said on X this week is that the front lines are an absolute hellscape. He says that these newly formed corps have inherited a disastrous situation, which basically means they keep getting these untrained soldiers. They don't have the equipment. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the expertise. So we're backing people who are suffering needlessly. So is there any tactical reason that those troops would be where the war is not? And what do you make of this assessment?
Yeah, I would have to see where that map was drawn from because, I can tell you for certain that that's not the only places where the Ukraine forces are. They are most definitely in those areas all throughout the line of contact because there's fierce clashes that go on all the time from the north to the south, all the way through there. But the problem is that there are just too few of them. This is something I've been reporting on our channel for quite a while now, a number of months, because it's coming in from both East and Western reporters that there are just insufficient density of Ukraine troops. They're just spread too thin. And now then, this is the first time we've seen what we've been predicting, which is finally there were just so few infantrymen to hold territory, and the Russians had so many infantrymen, they were able to penetrate the lines, break through the fortifications, and in fact, many of the fortifications, which was reported and puzzling by many of the Russian side, or at least surprised, that they weren't manned. There were some really good fortifications, trench lines, etc., where sometimes they were even equipped, but there was no one there because they just don't have enough to fill all the gaps. And then when Russia starts really stressing a lot of people in over a broad front like this one in north of Pokrovsk is, they just don't have the people to do it. So the problem is that they're now trying to pull people off of some of those territories to move them in to try and stop the bleeding here. There's an Azov brigade that's allegedly been dispatched from Kiev to get down there further. I just don't know that that's going to be able to help it, because this new formations are coming in where they don't have defensive positions. And to underscore the real problem here, it's not just that Russia made a big penetration, but it's where they did it. This is like the pivot of the entire eastern line of fortifications for the Ukraine side. And if this is pushed much further beyond, then Russia can literally roll troops in behind the rest of the formations, and both north and south, depending on how many forces Russia has to exploit this. And I don't know for sure on that, but all of that could really unhinge the entire defensive line, and this could go south in a big hurry.
Yeah, and by the way, someone in the chat was saying that map is propaganda, and then someone else in the chat was saying, no, that map is not propaganda. Those maps overlaid are exactly from the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, and you can almost match them up verbatim now, and you can see. And there was very little difference, in fact, in any of these maps at this point, where the Ukrainian soldiers are in the north in Belgorod near Russian borders, far away from what was the contested special military operation areas of Luhansk and Donbass and Donetsk and et cetera. So not to go down that rabbit hole, but I just want to point out about the idea of this being propaganda.
Well, I do want to point out there, because that's important, because there are some reports that Zelensky, and this is, in my honest opinion, an example of how bad of a tactical commander he is. I know he's always talked about being a Churchillian type figure, but he is reportedly sending additional troops into the Sumy area to try and make another incursion into Russia and in Belgorod areas there, because he's desperate to have some kind of good media coverage to show that they're on the offensive and taking the fight to the Russians, et cetera, which he says every time they do these kinds of things prior to Friday to make it look like they're stronger. This is a suicidal operation when your forces are being penetrated in a crucial area in the east. That is the worst time to divert any of your forces up to an operation in the north that cannot succeed, but yet that's exactly what appears to be happening.
That's a great point. That's a great point. The last time they did that, they were slaughtered. And they got a few drones that attacked some apartment complexes, but the soldiers that went across got slaughtered.
But that was what makes him a demon, is that he's willing to risk so many lives for a little PR juice. For lack of a better word.
That's what happened in Bakhmut. That's what happened in Avdiivka. That's what happened in Krinky in the south. That's what happened in Sumy, in the Kursk area in the north. And then now, not only did they lose all that territory, now then Russians have a big toehold in Sumy province that they probably wouldn't have had before had it not been for that. So every one of those, every single one was a military disaster. And now then the biggest one of all seems to be unfolding in Pokrovsk.
We'll get you out of here on this, Colonel, which is about Zelensky and what he thinks he's going to be able to ask for in Alaska at this summit.
Well, he's not going with what he can send on a note.
But so anyway, what he thinks he's going to be able to ask for through his intermediaries or whatever, wants some sort of robust security guarantees in the form of weapons and a path to NATO membership. So NATO membership? I mean, is any of this going to happen for Ukraine or Zelensky at this summit, do you think?
Listen, I think just not trying to be mean or rude or anything else, but Zelensky has lost his ability to accurately assess what's happening on the ground. He is genuinely delusional, and unfortunately that delusion is fed by many of the European leaders who are saying the exact same things that you did. Apparently there's going to be a big meeting tomorrow where they're going to try to get together on a conference call with President Trump, and they're going to try to convince him not to give away anything to Putin. They want territorial guarantees. They want security guarantees, which is code for leaving NATO on the table. Keir Starmer has said just in the last 72 hours, NATO is still on the table and is still possible for Ukraine, etc. Basically, they want to go in as though they were in the position of authority, and they're convincing Zelensky, or not that he needs any convincing, he's eager to do it, but they're all on the same sheet of music, which is opposite of where Trump is, and there is no reality to that. There is absolutely no leverage that they have that they can bring to bear on here, and it really puzzles me why they're still saying those things.
Colonel Davis.
I'm fine with being mean or rude to the Zelensky administration. He's cost so many people their sons.
Colonel is nicer than you and I.
Fair point.
We'll be mean and rude. We appreciate your tactical and I would say, diplomatic response to this.
Some people in the chat said, yes, Colonel Davis is here. So thank you as always, Colonel. Great to see you. Kino says,
Always
this
my
Colonel
pleasure.
knows what's up. Yes, he does. Colonel, great to see you as always.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So that's the news update part of today's video. Now I want to tell you about today's sponsor, which is tied directly to Trump's move here on bringing American mining back to America. That company is American Tungsten Corporation. Here's their ticker on your screen. It trades on major brokers like Interactive Brokers, Charles Schwab. To me, this is the only one company that checks all of the boxes when it comes to tungsten. The most important of which is that they have the best chance, according to publicly available information, of being the first in America to bring tungsten production back to the United States. The first. Yeah, I'm talking first mover advantage here with Trump's new minerals push. Now, I have thoroughly studied this company, and here's what I want to report back to you this year. So it's hard for me not to get excited about this one, guys. I've been looking at it for quite a while. The U.S. hasn't mined tungsten commercially since 2015, relying heavily on imports, 37% of which comes from China alone in the latest data that we have. So this is a slap in the face of the Trump administration. Tungsten is indispensable. It's particularly critical for military uses. And with that, there are currently 0 active tungsten mines on U.S. soil. 0. Just let that sink in. So if the CEO of American Tungsten, Ali Haji, can execute on his business plan, American Tungsten could be the first and only tungsten miner in America that we know of within the next 2 years. I mean, that's a trophy asset right there. CEO Ali Haji has come up with a business plan that aims to put it back into production in the next 12 to 18 months.
The requirement of tungsten and its production to be brought online domestically is of paramount importance to the administration. So we acquired or optioned the mine in 2024. Having since done that, we have done a number of things, including rehabilitation work, which is now commencing. We're also looking at permitting. And the goal is to bring production online in the next 18 months to be the fastest tungsten producer in North America.
Well ahead of any current peer in the marketplace. So American Tungsten is my number one and my only tungsten opportunity that I'm featuring for you on this show for this very reason. Full stop. So guys, do your own due diligence on American Tungsten Corporation. I'll have links to their website, their information in the description below. And this is a major moment in the United States history, I believe, right now. Either we bring in a golden age of America, truly, and bring mining back to American soil, or we flat out fail and we completely bend the knee to China. And I don't believe President Trump is going to allow that to happen. That's my belief. Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to check out the description. I'll have links to their website and everything else there for you to do your own research on this. And we'll see you next time, everyone.